with Andy Torbet. Andy,
Hi.
how are you?
I'm all right. Yeah, good. Thanks.
So listen, I think this is a question I've always wanted to ask. Kind of kayaking, cave diving, skydiving, and all the other activities like high adrenaline activities. At what point did you realise this was kind of something you could do, kind of properly do, rather than just like fun?
Well, I think naively, I believed it. So I left it. I was in the army for 10 years,
Yeah.
force for 10 years, doing various bits and pieces, bomb disposal, paras, underwater operations, that sort of stuff. And I left the forces with this idea of making that adventure a living. Looking at Ronald Fiennes or Jacques Cousteau.
Yeah.
How hard can it be? It turns out I was a little bit naive, but what I learnt the hard way was that people won't just give you money to go and have these sort of adventure projects and whatever, but they will support you if you can come back and communicate it.
Okay.
So as well as being involved in actual scientific and archaeological projects
Yes.
for the sort of the academic community, also I started to write articles for magazines.
Yeah.
Back in the day when magazines was like a thing.
Yeah.
This all predates social media.
Yeah.
Making little short films to show at festivals, and started to give talks at the outdoor show and the dive show and these sort of outdoor festivals. And that's when I started to kind of scrape a living from actually,
And kind of, and I suppose, but you're still speaking to the captive audience. You're speaking to people who are interested. At what point do you realise you can impact the general public? I suppose people who don't, who maybe look at you, as someone who's out there doing amazing stuff, but I can never do that. That's not. Maybe couldn't even relate to you.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. One, when I started doing stuff on the TV in front of the camera, I learnt very early on that the skills I had could give access to places that people otherwise wouldn't get to see.
Okay.
A prime example being we dived for the BBC. We dived this flooded mine in Wales.
Yeah.
The day it closed down back in the 30s, the pumps were turned off, the low levels flooded, and it was frozen in time. We went down and we filmed it all, and it was a way of kind of unpacking this sort of hidden part of British history that, unless you're a cave diver, you're never going to be able to get to see. And then I think my first few talks, I got in the shows, but then I was asked to give some talks at schools.
Yeah.
And that's when you really start, you kind of figure that you may have something worthwhile to say.
Yeah.
And it kind of grew from there, really.
How scary was it being in front of children?
So still the hardest audience. I don't mind giving talks to kids at primary school. That's about last Friday.
Yeah.
It was career week at my children's primary school. Yeah. So I did the whole day, did reception, which is probably the hardest, all the way up to year 6, in England. And I found the slightly older kids easier. However, and sixth formers, great, same as adults, easy. But the sort of 14,
the proper teenagers,
15-year-olds, 14-year-olds probably, they give you nothing. My first talk to 14-year-olds, and they're just, you crack a joke, nothing. You show them some amazing picture of you like jumping out of a plane with rockets attached to you, they give you nothing. Now, I've since heard back, the talks went well, the teachers were really pleased, the kids were pleased, but they give you nothing, and it was just a hard
I feel I've taken you somewhere you didn't want to go again.
But I learned because I chatted to the teachers afterwards. I was like, "Oh my god, that went no, that's fine. That's it. They give you nothing because it's not cool to laugh or to be amazed. They just give you nothing. So, if you can deliver a talk that works to 14-year-olds, then you've pretty much hit the hardest audience you can get.
So let me ask about some of the content. I think we talk about risk, we talk about thriving under pressure. And again, you came out you're coming out of the army. Obviously, you probably spend a lot of time analysing how you reacted and how you acted in certain circumstances. Again, coming back to the parallels is how did you make that leap to I sit at a desk all day and I type on the computer and I'm on the phone. The concept about relating that to being in the cave and diving in the cave.
I mean, so throughout my sort of professional life, be it from bomb disposal to professional skydiving, cave diving, to being a stuntman, there's always that element of high element of risk.
Yes.
But I am not a psychopath or a sociopath. I get as scared as anyone else. I get as anxious. I feel stressed the same ways. So I'll use the examples because they make a point and because hopefully they're entertaining.
Yeah.
But it's the same kind of neurobiological and physical mechanisms happen to all of us. And I still get nervous giving talks. I still get nervous, even giving talks last week at my kids' school. I'm still getting nervous.
Is it a different type of nerves, or is it the same?
I mean, certainly from a body's response point of view, it's exactly the same.
Okay.
Yeah. In many ways, cave diving, although potentially fatal,
yeah,
whereas giving a talk at your kids' primary school shouldn't be.
Yeah.
One hopes.
Yeah.
But it's my environment, and I can almost control it. That I think the greater the risk, the greater control that is required to make that risk manageable, therefore safe. So the sort of the principles the genetic principles, a lot of which I've actually learned doing things like bomb disposal and high research, apply across the board, and they apply whether I am cave diving or skydiving or giving a talk or crossing the road. I usually use crossing the road as one of the examples that everyone can relate to it.
Yeah.
But it's the same principles, and it's a genetic kind of thought process that should work for everything. And yeah, we all get nervous, we all get anxious, we all get scared. So how we deal with that is the same.
Game.
Yeah.
But you're most fearful of primary school children.
And most fearful of 14-year-olds.
14-year-olds.
Yeah.
All right, so let me ask kind of, again, incredible stuff, and you get the example of the world's mind. What haven't you done that you've actually?
Well, that's a good one. Well, I mean, most sort of recently, there's a undived sort of cave project in France that I want to go and do, which requires me to basically dive in a whole lot of kit, carry that through a dry cave, dive again. I'm doing this all on my own, camp inside this dry chamber that's way into the system, and then camp it for 3 or 4 days and do my own dives out into the other parts. You are completely cut off from the outside world. Like, there's no comms in there. You may as well be in the moon. From a skydiving point of view, we've got the World Championships this year, so I compete at speed skydiving for Team GB. So that's kind of the project for this year. There's always there's too many ideas, not enough time as ever. Years ago, I don't think it's possible now, but years ago, I had an idea about jumping from space. So you've heard of the Red Bull space jump?
Yeah.
So he didn't jump from space at all, but he jumped about, I think, 60 kilometres. So the Kármán line is 100 kilometres up. It's the actual edge of space. So if you cross the Kármán line, NASA, ESA would award you astronaut wings. That's what qualifies you to space. There's enough gravity there, and I say this with a degree of credibility, because a friend of mine works for the UK Space Agency.
Okay.
He's a real boffin, and he thinks it's possible. That we could exit an aircraft on a parabolic flight at that point and get back to Earth. But he thinks the technology to make sure I wouldn't basically burn up on re-entry doesn't yet exist. We've got it at the back door.
But
otherwise it's there. Who knows? Give it a couple of years.
Do you think you'll ever stop doing stuff? And does it scare you, the thought of not stopping? Scare you, the thought of stopping?
I think that. And I've seen this with people from my own family. Once you sort of retire from life, you go downhill very, very rapidly.
Okay.
Now you can retire as long as you then get to travel the world or find a hobby or a cause or whatever it is, something that gets you out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
If you just stop, I think I've seen it. It's mentally and physically deadly. But also I've met runoff fines and people like that who are still doing stuff in their 80s.
Yeah.
And the reason they're still able to do stuff in their 80s is because they kept doing stuff in their 60s and their 70s and their 80s. So I think, don't stop. Of course, I will wind things back. I'm already getting to the point where, little niggles appear and such like.
So at what point do you turn around and say, okay, the jumping from space maybe is not going to happen now? How long do you give yourself?
Well, see, that's surprisingly easy on your body. In the sense that you exit the aircraft or spacecraft, and then you fall, and it's the technology that will keep you safe in sort of re-entry part. And after that, you pop your parachute, and then as long as your landing's okay, you're probably going to be all right. It's relatively. I've got a friend of mine who's 76 and still skydives. Yeah. Because if done correctly, it's actually quite kind of your body.
So obviously, my final question off the back of that is okay. What out of everything you do gives you the biggest adrenaline kind of or gives you the biggest kind of, makes you most kind of conscious about the risk you're taking?
I mean, I think probably some of the skydiving I've done, because it's a very, very fast sport,
Right.
which means your ability to spend time thinking about the solution to any problems you face is measured in seconds, if not microseconds. So I think that drives it home. Whereas with things like cave diving, that's a very long.
Yes, you're solving a long problem.
So usually, if you engage a problem, okay, I'm running out of gas in one cylinder. Okay, cool, I've got these cylinders. What I'm going to do? You've got seconds, if not minutes, to sort of take a breath and stop and think about, okay, how am I going to make sure I'm going to go home at the end of the day?
Yeah.
With skydiving, you have to be a bit more on your game instinctively, because you don't have that time to consider the problem.
And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much indeed. And I look forward to seeing you coming out of playing in space.
Thank you. Thank you.